Gullivers Travels by Jonathan Swift. My travels began on May the 4th, 1699. I said goodbye to my wife and 2 children and set sail from Bristol, a ship's doctor bound for the South Seas. All went well for the first few weeks. Then there was a bad storm and the ship was wrecked. 6 of the crew, of whom I was one, got into a little boat and began to row to an island nearby. Suddenly, a huge wave upset the boat and all the other men were lost. Only I, Lemuel Gulliver, was left. I swam as long as I could, and at last, just as I could swim no more, my feet touched the bottom. I waded through the water to the shore, where there was no sign of houses or people. I walked about a half a mile further, but still saw no one. Tired out, I lay down on the short, soft grass and went to sleep. When I woke up, it was daylight. I lay still for a moment, wondering where I was, then tried to get up. I could not move my arms, or my legs, or my head. I was tied to the ground. There was a buzzing noise near me, but I could not see what was making it. Suddenly, I felt something moving on my left leg. It walked up me and stopped close by my chin. I looked down as well as I could, for my hair was tied to the ground, and saw a tiny man, less than 6 inches high, with a bow and arrow in his hand. Then many more of these little men started to run all over me. I was so surprised that I roared loudly. They ran back in a fright and fell over one another trying to get away. I found out later that some of them had hurt themselves when they fell from my chest. I managed to break the strings that tied my left arm to the ground and pulled some of my hair loose so that I could move my head. This made the little men even more afraid, and they shot arrows at me. Some fell on my hands and some on my face, pricking me like needles and making my skin sore wherever they landed. The little men stood around at a distance, watching me. After a while, when they saw I was not going to hurt them, they cut some of the strings that bound me. This at least allowed me to move my head more. Now I could see that they had built a little platform beside my head so that their emperor could talk to me. He spoke for some time, but I could not understand him, and I began to grow hungry. I pointed to my mouth and pretended to chew. He seemed to understand, and at once sent some of his men to bring me food and drink. Ladders were put up against my sides, and over 100 of the little men climbed up, bringing baskets full of meat and bread. Each piece of meat was the size of one small piece of mince, so that I had to keep asking for more. The loaves were so tiny that I ate 3 at a time. I drank a whole barrel of their wine at a gulp. They kept looking at each other as if they could not believe it was possible to drink so much, but they brought me some more wine, which I drank. I made signs to let them know I would not try to escape, and they loosened the strings so that I could turn on my side. They also put some ointment on my face and hands, which took away the soreness their arrows had caused. Then I fell asleep again. When I woke up, I found myself on a kind of platform with wheels. It was moving towards the capital city of these tiny people about half a mile away. 1,500 of the emperor's largest horses, each about as big as my hand, were pulling me along. I later found out that it had taken 500 carpenters and engineers to make this platform, and no less than 900 men to put me onto it while I was still asleep. For some time I did not know what had wakened me. I was told later, however, that some of the young people wanted to see how I looked when I was asleep. They climbed up onto the platform and walked very softly up to my face. One of them, an officer in the guards, put the sharp end of his spear up into my nose, which tickled my nose like a straw and made me sneeze, waking me up. They ran away quickly before I caught sight of them. We made a long march for the remainder of that day and rested at night. They put 500 guards on each side of me, ready to shoot me if I tried to escape. At last we arrived at the capital city. The platform to which I was tied stopped outside a church, which was no longer used. Since this was the largest building in the whole country, the emperor had planned that I should live there. The door was just big enough for me to creep through when I wanted to sleep. Once inside, I could only lie down. The little men would not let me go free, however. They put nearly 100 of their tiny chains round my left leg, so that although I could stand up, I could not move very far. When this was done, the emperor came to see me. He carried in his hand a sword about as big as one of our darning needles to defend himself if I should break loose. He was a handsome little man, much taller than the rest of his court who were with him, and he wore a gold helmet with a plume on the crest. All the ladies and gentlemen of the court were dressed in gold and silver, which flashed in the sun. I tried to answer the emperor when he spoke to me, but he could not understand any of the many languages which I speak. Soon he went away to decide whether he would have to have me killed or not, for I would cost a great deal to feed and might be dangerous. After the emperor had gone away, a great crowd of the tiny people came to see me because none of them had ever seen such a big person before. Some of the men shot arrows at me, and one just missed my eye. The guards tied these men up and gave them to me to punish. I put 5 of them in my pocket and pretended I was going to eat the other one, who was very frightened. Then I took out my penknife and cut the cords that bound him and set him on the ground. I treated the other 5 in the same way, taking them one by one out of my pocket. Everyone was very surprised to see me treat them so gently. 2 of the guards went to the emperor to tell him what I had done. He decided that since I had been kind to his people, he would not have me killed. He ordered people who lived close to the town to bring me 6 cows and 40 sheep every day, and wine to drink. This was only just enough for me, since everything was so tiny. 300 tailors were told to make clothes for me, and 600 of the little people were to look after me. They were to live in tents outside the church to make it easier for them. Lastly, 6 men were to teach me their language. 3 weeks later, I was able to understand and talk to the little men. The first thing I asked the emperor was to set me free. He said that they must first see if I was carrying anything that could be a danger to his people. 2 men came to look through my pockets and wrote down everything they found. They gave me a new name, the Great Man Mountain. In my pockets they found a handkerchief, which they thought was like a carpet, a snuff box, which they called a chest filled with dust. It made them sneeze. A notebook in which they recognized very large writing. A comb. They knew what this was for, but said it looked like the railings round the emperor's palace. A knife, a razor, and a pair of pistols. All these things were new to them, and they could not think what they were for. A watch. They said it made a noise like a watermill. They thought it must be a god which I worshipped, because I told them I always looked at it before I did anything. a purse. They called this a net, large enough for a fisherman, but they knew I used it as a purse. They were very surprised at the size of the gold pieces in my purse. When the two little men had finished looking in my pockets, they looked at my belt. They wrote down that I had a sword as long as 5 men, and a pouch with 2 pockets. One of these pockets held black powder, the other very heavy round balls. They took their list to the emperor, who asked me to take out my sword and put it carefully on the ground. Then he asked me what my pistols were for. I told him not to be afraid, and I fired one of them in the air. Everyone fell down in fright, except the emperor, although he too went very white. He made me give up my pistols at once. I did so, telling him that the black powder must be kept away from fire because it was very dangerous. All my things were put away in the emperor's storeroom, except for my eyeglasses, which were in a pocket the men had not found. Slowly, the emperor and his people came to understand that they were in no danger from me. From time to time, some of them would dance on my hand, and the boys and girls liked to play hide-and-seek in my hair as I lay on the ground. Even the horses stopped being afraid of me, and horses and riders would take turns to leap over my hand as I held it on the ground. One day, some people came to tell the emperor that they had found a huge black object lying on the ground. They said it was not alive, and they thought it might belong to the great Man Mountain. It was my hat, which I thought I had lost at sea. To bring it to me, they made 2 holes in the brim and fastened cords from the hat to the harnesses of 5 horses. It was then dragged along the ground for half a mile. This did not do it much good. Another time, the emperor asked me to stand with my legs apart so that his army could march between them. There were no less than 3,000 foot soldiers and 1,000 horsemen, and they marched with drums beating and flags flying. I asked once more to be set free, and at last the emperor agreed, so long as I would obey his rules. I said that I would, and my chains were taken off. I had always wanted to see the capital city, and now that I was free, the emperor said I could. All the people were told to stay in their houses in case I walked on them. So they crowded to their windows to see me as I stepped over the wall into the square where the emperor's palace stood. It was really magnificent, like a big doll's house. I lay down to look inside, and the empress came to the window, smiling, and gave me her hand to kiss. Soon after I was set free, one of the country's great men came to see me. We had a long talk, and I learned many things. I had thought the island, which is called Lilliput, was a peaceful and happy one, but he told me this was not so.
You may have seen,
he said,
that some of us wear high heels and some wear low heels on our shoes. The emperor will let only people wearing low heels work for him, and those who like high heels feel that this is wrong. Because of this, there are many quarrels amongst the Lilliputians.
Then he told me of a much bigger danger that was about to befall his country.
There is an island close by called Blefuscu, and the people there are going to attack us.
Why? I asked him.
It all began long ago,
he replied.
When our emperor's great-grandfather was a little boy, he cut his finger one morning as he took the top of his egg. Up till then, everyone had cut off the big end of the egg. After that, however, the ruler of those times said that everyone must cut off the small end, and those who would not obey had to leave Lilliput. They went to the island of Blefuscu and called themselves the Big Indians. Now they are coming to make war on Lilliput, and the emperor wants you to help us.
I said I would help the people of Lilliput in any way I could, for they had been very kind to me. I knew that the Big Indians had about 50 warships lying at anchor, and I planned to seize them. I fixed 50 hooks to 50 lengths of cord, then I set off for Blefuscu. There was only about half a mile of sea between the islands, and I could wade most of the way except right in the middle where I had to swim. The enemy took fright when they saw me, and leaped out of their ships and swam to shore. I then fastened a hook to the prow of each ship and tied all the cords together at the end. While I was doing this, the big Indians shot thousands of their tiny arrows at me. I was afraid one would go in my eye, so I put on my glasses. After I had cut the anchor cables, I took up the knotted end of the cords to which my hooks were tied and set off back to Lilliput with 50 of the enemy's largest ships. The Emperor was so pleased with me that he made me a nardak, which is something like a duke in my own land. Now the Emperor wanted me to seize the rest of the enemy's ships so that he could be Emperor of the Big Endians as well as Lilliput. He would then be able to make the Big Endians obey his rules and cut off the small ends of their eggs. I would not do this, as I did not think it was right. This made the Emperor angry with me. Soon after this, some of the Big Endians came to make peace with the Lilliputians. When they saw me again, they asked me to come to Blefuscu one day so that everyone could see how big I was. I said that I would, which made the Emperor even more angry with me. His chief admiral was displeased with me too, not only because it was I who had defeated the Big Indian navy, which he could not do, but also because I had been made a nardak. There were others amongst the Emperor's great men who did not like me, some of them because I ate so much of their food, and some who thought I was dangerous. They all asked the Emperor to have me put to death as an enemy of Lilliput, because I had refused to do what the Emperor wanted. The Emperor refused to have me put to death because I had helped him. He thought for a long time. Then he said that the best way to punish me would be to put out my eyes. One of the great men was my friend. He came in secret to tell me what the Emperor had said so that I could save myself. When I heard what he had to say, I felt that the time had come for me to leave Lilliput, for I did not like the thought of being blind. To continue this story, when the music stops, turn the cassette over. I went down to the shore and took one of the Emperor's ships. I put my clothes in it so that they would not get wet, and pulled it after me as I swam across to Blefuscu. The Emperor of Blefuscu was pleased to see me, and so were all his people. They were kind to me, and I liked them. But I did not want to spend the rest of my life there. I wanted to get back home. Then, one day, I saw, out at sea, a full-size boat floating upside down. I asked the Emperor to lend me some ships and men to help me bring it to shore so that I could sail home in it. It took 2,000 of the tiny men to help me to turn the boat right side up once it was ashore. Then I had to get it ready for the long journey home. The thickest linen these people had was much thinner than that of our finest handkerchiefs, so 2 sails were made for me by putting 13 thicknesses together. 500 workmen were needed to make them. I made ropes and cables by twisting together as many as 30 of the thickest and strongest of their ropes. I made oars and masts with the help of the Emperor's ship carpenters. When all was ready, I stored food on board, and also live cows and bulls and sheep, which I wanted to show my family. I would have liked to take some of the little people with me, but the emperor would not allow me to. Off I set, and 2 days later I saw a big ship whose captain took me on board. He did not believe my story until he saw the live cows and sheep which were in my pocket. When at last I got home, my wife and children were very happy to see me again and hear all my adventures. As for the cows and sheep, I put them to eat grass in a park close by my house at Greenwich in London. Maybe you could see some of them there today if you went to look. A Voyage to Brobdingnag. After I had been at home for a while, I went to sea again, for I like to travel. The first part of our voyage was pleasant, with nothing to trouble us. Then one day there was a bad storm, and we were driven hundreds of miles out of our way. We were lost. There was plenty of food on board, but not nearly enough water. So when one day we saw land, the captain sent several of us ashore to get water. When we landed, there was no sign of a river or spring. The other men kept to the shore, looking for water near the sea. I walked inland, but I found no water and turned back. From where I stood, I could see our ship's boat with all the men on board rowing as quickly as they could back to the ship. They had left me behind. Then I saw why. There was a huge man-like creature chasing them, taking great strides through the sea. I did not wait to see what happened. I ran away as fast as I could and climbed a steep hill to see what the country looked like. I could not believe my eyes. The grass was nearly as tall as a house, with corn towering above it as high as a church steeple. I walked along what I thought was a high road, but which I found out later was just a footpath to the people of this land, and I came to a stile. Each step in this stile was like a high wall to me, and I could not climb it. As I was looking for a gap in the huge hedge, I saw another enormous man like the one I had seen chasing my friends. I was very frightened and ran to hide in the corn. He called out in a voice which sounded to me like thunder, and 7 other giants like himself came towards him. They carried scythes, each as big as 6 of our own, to reap the corn. I grew even more frightened. Where could I hide? I ran to and fro to keep out of their way, but they moved too fast for me to escape. At last I called out, "Stop!" as loudly as I could, just as one was about to step on me. The man looked down and picked me up, holding me tightly in case I should bite him. Then he took me to his master to show him what he had found. This man was a farmer, and the same man I had seen at first in the field. The farmer pulled out his handkerchief, wrapped me in it, and took me back to his farm. His wife screamed and ran away when she first saw me, just as my wife does when she sees a mouse. Then the 3 children came to have a look at me. They were just going to have their dinner, and they put me on the table where they could see me as they ate. It was like being on the roof of a house. I was in a terrible fright, and kept as far as I could from the edge for fear of falling. The farmer's wife gave me some crumbs of bread and minced up some meat for me. I took out my knife and fork and started to eat, which delighted them. The farmer's wife gave me her smallest cup. It was as big as a bucket, filled with cider, but I could not drink it all. Then in came the nurse with the baby in her arms. He wanted me as a plaything. When they gave me to him, He put my head in his mouth. I roared so loudly that the baby was frightened and dropped me. I would have been killed if his mother had not caught me in her apron. After dinner, the farmer went back to his fields, and his wife put me to bed with a handkerchief over me for a sheet. The bed was as wide as a main road in England, and the handkerchief thicker than the mainsail of a ship. Later on, the daughter of the house made a bed for me in the baby's cradle. This girl was very good to me. She was 9 years old, and small for her age in that country, since she was only 40 feet tall. She called me Grildrig, which meant little man, and taught me to speak their language. I liked her very much. As soon as the people who lived round about heard of me, they all came to have a look at me. One of them told the farmer that he should take me to town next market day and make people pay to see me. So he did this. His little girl came with us to look after me, and I called her my nurse. I was placed on a table in the largest room of the inn, which was as big as a football field. I did all the funny tricks I could think of. I stood on my head, I hopped about, and I danced to please the people who came to see me. The farmer made a great deal of money from showing me, and he decided to take me to other towns. At last, we came to the capital city where the royal family lived. The Queen liked me so much that she bought me from the farmer. I begged her to let my nurse stay with me, and she agreed. Then the farmer went back home. The Queen had a little room made for me with a roof that lifted up and furniture which was just the right size for me. To them it was a small box with straps round it so that they could carry it. The Queen had a set of silver cups, saucers, and plates made for me too. It was like a doll's tea set to her. I always had my meals at a little table on the Queen's table now, but I did not like to see the way she ate. She would put a piece of bread as big as 2 of our loaves in her mouth at one go. Her dinner knife was taller than me, and I thought it looked very dangerous. Every Wednesday, which was their Sunday, the King came to have dinner with us. He liked to talk to me and to ask me about England. He wanted to find out in what ways we were different from the people in his own country of Brobdingnag. The only one I did not get on well with was the Queen's Dwarf. He was 5 times as tall as me, about 30 feet, but this was small for them. The King was twice as tall as he was. The dwarf used to play tricks on me because the Queen liked me better than him. Once he dropped me in a jug of cream. I swam to the side and my nurse got me out. The Queen was so cross with him that she sent him away. I was pleased when they made a little boat for me and put it in a tub of water so that I could row about. Sometimes they put a sail on the boat, and the Queen and her women would make a wind for me with their fans. They liked to see how well I could steer. It was great fun for me. Sometimes, however, life in Brobdingnag was no fun at all. Once I had to fight off some wasps with my dagger. They were as big as our pigeons, with stings as long as my thumb and as sharp as needles. I killed 4 of them, but the rest got away. On another day, a monkey came into my room and picked me up. I think he took me for a baby monkey, for he stroked my face gently as he held me. Suddenly, there was a noise at the door, and he leaped through the window and up to the roof, carrying me with him. They had to get ladders and climb up to drive the monkey away and bring me down. When the King was talking to me one day, I said I could teach him how to make gunpowder so that he would win a lot of wars. The King of Brobdingnag, however, was a very wise man. He said that he did not want to learn how to do it, and I must never talk about it again. He said that if a man could make 2 ears of corn or 2 blades of grass grow where only 1 grew before, he would do more good than he could ever do by winning a war. Soon after this, the King and Queen and their servants set off on a long journey to another part of Brobdingnag. I went with them in my box. They fixed up a hammock in it so that I should not feel the bumps so much as we went along. My nurse came too, but she got a bad cold on the way. When at last we came to a stop, she had to rest in bed for a few days. I knew we were near the sea, and I longed to see it again. Since my nurse was in bed, one of the Queen's pages was told to take my box down to the seashore. I lay in my hammock looking out at the sea, and felt sad. When would I see my home again? The page went off to look for birds' eggs, and I fell asleep. I awoke suddenly with a jolt. There was a loud swishing noise above me, and my box seemed to be moving upwards very fast. I called out several times, but no one answered. Then I guessed what had happened. A big bird, perhaps an eagle, had swooped down and picked up the ring of my box in his beak. I was flying through the air. Soon there came a loud squawking as if the eagle were fighting, and all at once I was falling. Faster and faster, down, down, down. My box stopped with a great splash. After a moment I stopped trembling and looked out of the window. I was at sea. I pulled open a little trapdoor in the roof of my box to let in some fresh air. Then I called for help, but no one heard me. How I wished my nurse was with me. Taking out my handkerchief, I tied it to my walking stick. Then I stood on a chair and pushed my flag through the little trapdoor, waving it to and fro and calling for help again. No one came. I gave myself up for lost. I sat without hope for a long time. Then, as I stared through the window, I suddenly realized that my box was being pulled along. After a little while it stopped, and there was a clattering above my head like that of a cable being passed through the ring on top. Once more I pushed my flag out of the trapdoor and called for help. This time, to my great joy, someone answered, in English. I begged him to come and let me out. He told me that I was safe and that my box was tied to the side of his ship. He said he would send a man to cut a hole in it. Soon this was done, and with the help of a ladder and many willing hands, I was pulled up onto the deck. It was an English ship, with English sailors, not giants, not little men, but people the same size as me. The sailors asked me why I had been in the box. When I told them my story, they did not believe me. At first, the captain thought I had been shut up in the box because I had done something very bad. When I told him about the Brobdingnagians, he did not believe me either. I showed him a gold ring the Queen had given me. It was so big I wore it round my neck like a collar. And I gave him a giant's tooth, which a Brobdingnagian dentist had taken out by mistake. It was as big as a milk bottle. At last he believed me. He said he would take me back to England with him, and we set sail for home. Many weeks later, when I left the ship and came on land again, the houses and people all looked so small that I thought I must be in Lilliput once more. When my wife heard all about the dangers I had been through, she said I must never go to sea again.